introduce and or have the opportunity to spend time with Dominique Molina. Hi, Dominique. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Julie. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure. As I mentioned in some of the marketing when I put out my reel, I was actually in Clearwater Beach at that time, putting a message out, letting everybody know that they've got to come and attend. I live up in Wisconsin, so Clearwater Beach was a long way away for me and had some really great weather. But anyway, as I'd mentioned, I use the word multifaceted. When I talk about Dominique, she's multifaceted. Dominique is an author, she's an educator, she is certainly a tax strategist, she's a CPA. She has all of the credentials that anyone would need and or want to really live their best life. And that's exactly what Dominique has done. Dominique has provided forums for teaching, for educating other CPAs, and also even consumers. So today what I'd like to do is introduce Dominique and have her share a little bit about her story. As I'd mentioned, Dominique is the co-founder and president of AICTP, the American Institute of Certified Tax Professionals. She is also she's a business owner, obviously a tax strategist. She has many books that she's written, but more than anything, she has this earning passion that she wants to help people with their tax advising and planning. And it's not just her own customers, it's also other professionals. There's certainly a need in today's world. And so without further ado, why don't we go and say hello to Dominique?
Hi, Julie. Thanks for having me.
It's always our pleasure, Dominique. I thought what we do today start is some are going to be new in the audience. Why don't we take some time to talk a little bit about you, Dominique? Tell us your story from your words rather than what we might read in public information.
Oh, so you want the dirt? That's what you want. So a little known fact. Well, I'm a CPA, so I have to say it might not be that exciting, the skeletons that are out there, but I think, Julie, like most CPAs, I took the straight and narrow path until I realized that the road to burnout was paved in perfectly reconciled bank statements. I started in traditional accounting. I got my CPA license, worked for a really large national firm, and ticking and tying, late nights, caffeine-fueled tax seasons. But deep down, I knew I was not born to be a human calculator. And I think the real shift for me came when I saw businesses that were much more successful than mine. They were paying more in taxes than I actually made. And in some cases, more than they were actually keeping in profit. And so I was thinking at that time, isn't there a better way to do this? And I knew that there were people who paid taxes very differently from one another. And at that time, the only mystique around it was that they're rich or they're famous. One of those two things must be true. And it turns out there is a better way to do it, and it's called tax planning. And so I pivoted really hard and took my practice in a direction that focused on the tax strategy piece of that. And there became such a demand for my services, modeling my business in this way. And I had a real hard time getting educated on that. You see, most of the tax strategy is rooted in law, and most tax professionals don't go to law school. And I wanted to know more. I wanted to know the ins and outs and how things were legal in terms of paying a lot less in tax. And so I went to law school, and a lot of people were in desperate need in the CPA field of having a better balanced practice, being respected better by clients, having better paying engagements. And tax planning has really been a key, not only for me, solving that issue that I was faced in my own practice. We shouldn't need caffeine drips to get through life in general. But it was really necessary at one time for me to just kind of get through the deadlines and the piles and piles of work. And so what I did was I founded the American Institute of Certified Tax Planners so that we have integrity, behind the expertise of tax planning, so that accountants who don't want to go to law school or practice in a courtroom have a resource for learning these types of strategies and can bring this to the masses of everyday small business owners that are just trying to make a living and have happiness in their life as well. And so I still have my tax practice, but I also get to help accountants turn their brain power into bottom line results for their clients and for themselves. And so it's been a really fruitful and just exciting opportunity for me to work in the profession.
Wow, not only a CPA, but then let's go to law school and really put the exclamation point on it. Good for you. You know, Dominique, it's so interesting in the profession. They've been hearing all kinds of messages for so long. I mean, not only that do we have so many that are retiring, but you need to move into cloud-based software. I mean, let's talk about that was a message 15 years ago. And also firms have been hearing about, I need to focus on my higher value clients. I need to focus on offering true value. My clients don't necessarily want me to just focus on compliance work. It's what's inside of that compliance work. So knowing that intellectually, so many of these firms understand they need to move past compliance, how do you get them to do that when they're so hyper-focused on compliance?
Yeah, it's kind of like that that squeaky wheel, right? It's that they say the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And compliance is like brushing your teeth. It's essential, but nobody's giving you a standing ovation for doing it. And yet it's also something that is all consuming. We never really know what we're getting into when we take on an engagement. And so as a result, you might think that you're taking on a 10-hour project, but you come to find out it's actually 60 hours, because at the end of the day, what's got to be done has got to be done. And so
Right.
the light bulb went off for me when I realized that every tax return and every set of accounting is a story. Buried in those line items are missed opportunities, are red flags of our untapped gold mines. Clients don't just want and need you to report the past. They really want a guide and a partner in helping them to write their future. And so the big change for me came about in trying to pull myself out of that demand, because it's so consuming. It's all consuming. It's time consuming. It's attention consuming. And it's even life consuming. There's an awful lot of us in the profession that have found ourselves giving up authentic life experiences because we're so consumed by getting it right and brushing your teeth.
Right.
And it's really that you have to stop yourself. You have to pull yourself out of preparing tax returns or getting the details just right in the accounting. Now, don't get me wrong, that's essential and it's needed to be done, but you can start using that as a springboard for strategy. And that really changes everything. And I think what makes us such a good partner with Unison Globus, Julie, is that we can be partners in that realm, because you provide relief on that side of the necessary, the accuracy, the high degree of detail. And when you can step out then and allow that detail to be a springboard for the higher level, more valued conversations that you can have or work that you can offer with your clients, it completely changes the game in terms of our own private practices and the effectiveness that we can have.
I really like the brushing your teeth analogy, and that one's going to stick with me for a while, because it's something so simple, but we've just got to be thinking about it. It's interesting.
Sometimes it's complicated, right, Julie? Because we think of it as being simple, but again, once you get under there and you start finding out, well, I had a bunch of popcorn yesterday. So, the whole day I'm flossing out the little kernels from popcorn. So, it can seem very simple on the surface, but until you really get in under there, The problem is that nobody can really appreciate that level of detail except for fellow accountants.
Yes,
and
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
so it's hard to then get the glory for that when people don't really understand what's going on. And so, I apologize for cutting you off there, but I wanted to make sure that we come back around to that. You don't ever graduate from the necessity of the accuracy in the detail. If you can have support and a partner in that, it makes it much easier to be freed up to do the more visible things. If I look great and I have a great looking smile and sparkling white teeth, and that's noticeable, and then I can actually focus on that piece of it. But the underlying dirty work has to be done as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's so important to put an exclamation point after that. When I look at my background, I worked for a very large tax audit and accounting software organization. So I was always involved in technology. And there was one thing that we could not solve for. We could solve for productivity and efficiency, but it was that human discernment. That human discernment is what is really needed. And that's when I made my shift to move over to an offshore staffing organization. Having the talent or the technology background, I vetted out 7 different companies before I landed with Unison Globus. And there's a lot to be said with respect to how and what we're offshoring or outsourcing. First of all, truth be told, my marketing department knows I don't like the term outsource or offshore, because it's smart sourcing and it's smart shoring. It's doing the right things. And with Unison, especially at AICTP, the reunion that's coming up, I'm going to talk to your members about what I'm coining as offshore staffing 2.0. We still need the offshore in there because every SEO engine is going to pick up on it, as my marketing team would share with me. But we're going to talk about what does it really mean and what does it look like today to match up and be relevant with our firms of today and our clients of today. Our clients are demanding so much more than just do my accounting work or do my tax return. They're sophisticated. And as a result, we need a sophisticated team to support you. And it's not just about putting human bodies in to do the compliance work. It's about building a team, a relevant team that also upholds your professional reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we look globally at our competition, so to speak, we're competing with the big 4 and the top 100 accounting firms that all have teams of professionals that they are able to leverage and to have that power behind them. And that puts us at a disadvantage if we're not able to do that same type of thing. And so what I love about that is the opportunity to put that within reach. But it's not just something you send off and you forget about it, Julie. It's that team. You're building the minds behind it so that you can function as one unit towards that common goal. And so I'm really excited for your topic coming up here at the end of July, because I think it's really helping people to see the bigger picture and getting back to that springboard and using it as leverage to allow you to do different things in your firm. We don't often compare ourselves with maybe the top 100 firms or certainly the big 4, and there's reasons for that. But when we can bring that closer in terms of having access to resources, we now can take our firm in a direction that we want to take it. That could mean, more work-life balance. That could be me being more strategic, offering more value-added services, being more of a true partner to our clients. But the bottom line is you actually have a choice. So it gives you that ability now to take your firm in a new direction that maybe wasn't possible before.
Yeah. And it's scary. It is scary for firms that are so comfortable with heads down compliance. It's comfortable to them. That's what they've always done. So to be able to lift their head up and, they've got to change. They've got to transform. They have decisions and they have options. And that's what I think is really important, is they have options. Do they want to? What do they want their firm to look like? Do they want a healthy, happy lifestyle? It's options.
Yes. And
Dominique,
that's
are
a
you
good
still?
feeling.
Go ahead.
It's a good feeling.
You bet. Embrace that feeling. So as you've been working with, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the reunion that's coming up in July. I'm really looking forward to it. Are you, on a regular basis, are you taking additional members in AICTP?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And our tax planning summit is an event that we have every year. This year it's in Charleston at the end of July, and so certainly that's a good way to get your feet wet and kind of experience a little bit about a sampling, if you will, of some of the training and support that we have. But I would say that AICTP is kind of like Hogwarts for tax pros. It's a lot less wizard robes, but just as much magic. And our mission is to help accountants and EAs escape the grind of that transactional work and build profitable advisory practices that focus on proactive tax planning. And so we train, license, and support now over 1,700 members who want to be seen as trusted advisors, not just tax preparers. And I think that's kind of key in this evolution of technology. You and I have been talking off air a lot about AI lately, and what role does that play? I think it's really important that we seize the opportunities that we have in front of us right now. And part of how we do that at the Institute is live and on-demand training, real life case studies where we are in the trenches and working with real life tax plans every single day, marketing scripts, client communication tools, software that allows you to do tax scenarios and run simulations so you can see what choices are better for your clients. And our members kind of move through levels, almost like a video game, if you will, from certified tax coach to certified tax planner to certified tax strategist. And it's like a ladder to freedom and confidence and year-round premium fee revenue.
Outstanding. Thank you for sharing that. I'm really looking forward to getting close to your members. And one of the things that I really want to understand is it's got to be really interesting when firms make this shift and they realize that they need to be focusing on advising and not necessarily compliance. Mm-hmm. How do you keep them when they, for example, say they take on a Unis and Globus and they build out a team and they know that they're not supposed to be focusing in the compliance, but yet it's got to be always lingering because that's what they're hardwired to know is that compliance work. How do you coach your clients on how to make sure they stay out of the detail, or to stay above it, to let their teams actually be their team support?
That's tough, right? I think it's tough on a number of fronts. I think psychologically it's tough because you are getting out of your comfort zone a little bit, right? We're used to being in this highly demanding, all-consuming work, and strategy is very different. Strategy feels very different. And so it can be a little counterintuitive. It feels a little uncomfortable, to be honest. And that's why I started this kind of describing that squeaky wheel, getting the grease analogy, because it's not as demanding. It's not as loud. It's not as all-consuming. And so when you come from that background, it actually can feel foreign and like, oh, maybe it's not right because I'm so used to being abused into submission here. So yeah, it's a really different position. And again, it's not going back to the teeth brushing. It's not belittling or demeaning the importance and the value and the place that compliance has in the work that we do, because we're only as good as the information that we have. And I think that's a real challenge for folks that want to get into tax planning, because all too often, maybe they've tried, maybe they've had a conversation with a client where they've said, well, I'm doing your tax return right now, and you told me you sold that rental property last year. I wish you would have talked to me about that because we could have done some planning. Make sure you talk to me next time. And then, of course, inevitably a year goes by and we see the same people. And guess what? They repeated the same behavior. And so it's real easy for people to kind of give up and say, oh, well, that doesn't work. This planning thing doesn't work. It really takes a complete discipline change in how we work with our clients. We have to put them in a position to work with us in real time with reliable information. And so they go hand in glove. We have to have reliable, accurate records, but we can't afford to stop there. And I think all too often it takes up all of our time. And so we really don't ever get the luxury of then graduating from, now I have these nice clean books and records. Now I'm going to do something with that information, because now we are forced to move on to the next deadline. So it's really about mastering that work style so that we can get support, we can get trusted, reliable teamwork, so that we've got the information that we need. And now I also have the time to be able to strategize with it. And so it's a real key in terms of mastering that discipline. And I'm going to use the word discipline because you really do have to have smart use of your virtual teams. And so I love what you're doing there, Julie, with some of the language around offshoring and how we use that better. Because if all we do is then get enveloped in the next all-consuming compliance project, again, we never graduate on to then be able to do the strategy piece. So it is really a team effort. It's a team approach. And it's discipline to step out into the space that feels very different maybe than the experience that you've had before. Embrace that uncomfortability so that you can then build your skill set and bring that strategy to the table while you're ongoing and doing that work with your clients. Because this isn't a one and done thing. I think all too often people in the industry label this as a singular event. We did a tax plan, we did a tax strategy, and then we go back to business as usual. And that's certainly one approach. But when you really want to have transformation in your practice, transformation in the lives of the businesses that you're coaching, it's not a one and done thing. It is a program. It is ongoing. And that's what makes this whole thing sustainable in year-round premium fee income. It's not simply doing a plan and moving on. We change that entire approach with our client, and we are allowed then to do what is necessary and dirty and has to be done in the compliance side, because it has to. But we get rewarded because we're able to share those rewards with our clients in terms of their results. And so then they become much more willing to pay for the entire experience because they actually see more of what they want.
Absolutely. That was just power packed with so many different thoughts and ideas that are really really driving the fact that it is a transformation and it's ongoing. We have so many clients that we hear from, I've tried offshoring before, I'll never do it again. It didn't work for me. And some of the things that you just hit on were some of the reasons as to why it didn't work. And I think it's really important, we don't really have a choice. We have a very much of an aging population. We have an enormous amount of CPAs that are going to be retiring and or should have. And you know what? They've earned their retirement and should go and enjoy it. But they feel like they can't get away. But we don't have enough students coming in. So the beautiful thing is we now have global expansion. We have now the global ability to go pick and choose our recruits. Where do we want to focus? And having a virtual team. I'm going to tell a story when I'm at AICTP with respect to how offshore staffing started. Let's give some credit to those CPA firms in the US that went over to India. In our example, we'll use India, that put their stake in the ground and decided that, wow, with this immensely proud group of individuals, we're going to build them up. We're going to build your universities. We're going to focus on accounting. We're going to build the environment that we need to help support what's really a challenge in the United States. And so when I position it that way, these are the CPA firms of the US that have done this. And then it is taken off. So we know that this in the future, intellectually, everyone knows you're going to need some help, because let's face it, on the traditional hiring models, they're just not scalable. You bring one employee in, you get really excited about it, you invest in them, you blood, sweat, and tears, you train them, and inevitably it doesn't work out. And I want to be able to build that confidence of, oh, this one didn't work out, we've got the next one. But it is all about creating that upfront. About 80% of clients that come to us, get ready for this stat, about 80%, Dominique, do not even have their SOPs documented. 80%, or they do have them documented and maybe they haven't revisited them in 20 years. So that's one of the things we give to our firms right away, is that gift of redocumenting. Let us work with you. Let's review your SOPs. That's how important they are. If we're all going to be playing in the same hymn book, and some of us are onshore, some of us are it doesn't matter. I live in Wisconsin. It could be that my team's in Green Bay, Wisconsin, rooting on the Packers. It doesn't matter where the virtual team is. But it is still a virtual team, and they need guidance and direction to be able to grow.
Yes. And I think so many of us are not equipped to give that guidance and direction, right? I didn't wake up one day and decide to become a CPA because I love managing people.
For sure.
And so when you talk about this concept about what's been tried before and hasn't been successful, it really gets to the heart about what delegating is and what it isn't. Delegating isn't about doing less, it's about doing better. And the number one complaint that we have right now is support. We can't find the support that we need here, but we've got blinders on, because if you're not only looking in terms of support for what staff can you grow and develop, but personally, it's the support in developing that team, because I wasn't born to do that. And I didn't get trained in accounting school in how to be a manager and how to spot talent and how to develop that talent and keep the team doing well. And so it's about not just finding a place that you can abdicate all of your responsibilities, but it's how do we free up our time, reinvest that time wisely, but tap into resources and tools that are available to take that piece of our practice and do it really well. It's not just about putting a body in a seat somewhere that can get the work done. To your point, it's about bringing and developing that team that is my team. We are a team, and we may not work in the same office, but this is part of what I'm offering to my clients. And when you reinvest that time wisely, because now I've got a supportive team behind me, I can use that for whatever I want. I can use it to meet with clients. I can use it to uncover planning opportunities. I can build relationships. I can grow my revenue. And I think virtual teams are a really fantastic way to make compliance effortless, but you still are doing the full cycle. You're still leading, you're still developing, you're still training, you're still retaining, but the burden is no longer just on the firm owner themselves. And so the real ROI is in how you show up once you're out from under that mountain of work. And I think the two go hand in hand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And let's also face it, it's HR, not many smaller organizations have a full HR team or a full training team. Like you said, that falls on the owner. Right. Starting to build up a virtual team, you now have more teammates that can train others. You are pulling yourself away indefinitely because you have others that understand how your firm works, the clients, the SOPs, all of the beautiful things that you have worked so hard over the years to put in place are now being transferred to to a group of individuals that are immensely proud of their work. And let's face it, we struggle with a little bit of that today. We struggle with our younger kids and young adults, I should say. Mom of four, so they're always going to be my kids, but they are younger adults, right?
Right.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that you're able to, we don't have a lot of kids coming out of college and wanting to focus in on accounting, but those that are, do you think that we're catching them at an earlier stage in their career to focus on planning and advisory? Or do you think they're going down the traditional path?
Well, I think that's a big part of the problem, right? The part of the problem is less and less people are entering this profession because, frankly, it doesn't look that attractive. It's a new
There's a lot to be said
generation of
about that.
Yeah, it's a new generation of ideas and dreams and hopes for what people want to get out of life. And I think sometimes we have to look at ourselves as, what picture am I painting for the new generation of accountants coming in? And they're flat out just saying, I don't want to live like that. I don't want to be eating my sandwich over my keyboard at lunchtime. I don't want to be missing my kids' little league games and plays and dance recitals. I don't want to be putting off vacations. I've seen my parents do it, or I've seen my elders in the industry doing it, and I don't want to do it. And so we've got a big advocacy portion of our organization that is here to help inform students so that they understand that there are more than just the calculator tape running jobs where you're sitting in a cubicle for 70 hours a week with no life. That there's lots of sexy and exciting and interesting strategies that you can do with people and see lots and lots of different businesses. But you do have to be able to climb out from under that mountain of compliance work to be able to explore that side of accounting. And and so some of it is just the messaging. It's, can we get younger people the exposure to these different job opportunities that exist in what we do? And let's just face it, and I just am going to be completely honest and lay it bare here. I like the tape running and the calculating and the Excel spreadsheets. I do. I just don't like it 80 hours worth a week. And I think most people will agree with me. So there's nothing wrong if that is the type of work that you like, but I think we do need to be able to offer more flexibility. People want to be able to travel. They want to live like a nomad. They want to be able to work from anywhere. They want to work with cool and interesting people that are global. And I think we are living in an age that allows us to do that, but maybe our educational institutions haven't kept up quite with that. And so I challenge everybody that's watching this today to get involved in mentorship, get involved with your alumnus. If you're connected to your accounting society at your college, or some group, some way of being able to just stay connected so that the students can understand that maybe it's not like everything that they've seen before.
Yeah, I think that's really solid advice. I'm on my way to another conference this week, and I'm really excited to see this one individual that was at the conference last year. It happened to be that he was still in college, and he just rolled the dice and called the organization and said, "Hey, I'd like to get some exposure. Why don't you come to our conference?" He came to the conference and he walked in like he owned the place. The guy was maybe 20, 21 years old, but he was so excited. He was looking around and talking to mentors, and people were excited. And I just love that fresh energy. And I bet you this year he's bringing some friends with him as well. But if we can keep moving the needle, if we can keep showing up with the individuals that we want the younger crowd to see, that's what's important.
Yes.
I don't want to have them exposed to the partner that is not doing well, is thinking about retirement, but he should have retired 20 years ago, but he can't because nobody else is out there to support his clients. Yes. How would you like to, you raise your family, you retire, you move on with life. How would you like to be in such a situation that you can't retire, that you can't move away from your clients because you don't want to leave them without?
True. I think the other thing is, it's so consuming that you often don't have the luxury of sitting back and thinking a bigger scale like that to say, do I want to retire? When do I want to retire? How do I want to retire? Because it's just all consuming. And so I think what happens is you suddenly look up one day and you're 70 years old. I mean, we've all had that experience. I haven't hit 70 yet, but we've all had that experience where you look up and you go, whoa, what happened? Time really passed by there. And it's easy to do in this profession. And so a lot of times I'm seeing it just come too late. The questions come too late. The questions come, now what can I do? Now, I am here to say I have a lot of success with folks that, had hoped to retire long before, realized they couldn't for one financial reason or another, and have been able to use tax strategy as a springboard to allow them to do that, because either it's improved the value of their firm in a very short period of time so they could sell for a lot higher price, or they've been able to transform their practice to run passively. And I think that's a concept that's very foreign to CPAs and tax accountants, because it is so demanding that they can never conceive of running it in a way that allows them to work a handful of hours a month, for example. And I think that's an appealing direction for a lot of people that maybe aren't ready to retire. If you truly love what you do, that makes it a really hard choice too, to envision a life where you're not doing what you absolutely love to do. The relationships that we build with some of these small business owners, or the work itself, is so meaningful. And maybe if you're not ready to give that up, a beautiful hybrid would be to look at how you can transform your practice into a passive business that gives you that retirement income that you're seeking, gives you more freedom and flexibility. And running your firm in this way, focused on strategy, is one way to do that. And I think it's people are pleasantly surprised when maybe they thought that wasn't an exit strategy for them.
I think that's pretty profound. They're a little bit more adaptable and ready because they've got to make some type of a change. They cannot move on sustaining the way they are. I like that message a lot. I would love for them to understand that much earlier in their life and live a more well-balanced life. Yeah. I joke with some of my teammates every year that I'm going to, being up in Wisconsin, we have something that's called the Deer Hunters Widows Ball. Okay, so all the deer hunters go, and so there's a ball, there's a party for the deer hunter widows. And I have been talking to one of my colleagues that I want to host a tax planner, or excuse me, it would not be a tax planner, a tax preparer, tax professionals, widows, because they're the ones that do not have the time with their family, and that's all they want. Right. Balance in life, especially today, as we all become much more astute in our own health and wellness.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Dominique, let's pivot a little. So there's a lot to be said about how you run your business. And it was traditional, not you specifically, but CPAs. It was always traditional that you billed by the hour. You had your staff managing their time by the hour.
Yeah.
That's a huge transition to move into value-based, to move into fixed pricing. Talk to me about your journey and how you help others on their journey to move from an hourly billing methodology to a value-based or a fixed price.
Yeah, I think it's definitely more commonplace today than it was certainly when I started back in 2006, when I started this transition of focusing on value pricing. And so that's the good news, is you aren't going to get, it's not so shot in the dark out there, and there's guidance available to help you with that. But I think, Julie, it becomes even more important and valuable now as we look at things like AI and technology, because here's the problem. What happens when everything is based on your hourly billing and suddenly you spend no hours doing that work anymore? That's problematic, right? And you can't leverage if you're billing by the hour. There is no leverage there to be had. And so it's really important, especially as we're able to make use of global talent, to bring in technology, automation, things of that sort. We have to place a greater emphasis on that value piece of it. The big obstacle, though, comes when it's really difficult to see the value in what you do. And so we often know the value of what we do. If we take a case, for example, we've all had these cases where you get the books and the person's telling us it's no big deal, and they say it's really easy and everything's clean and it's up to date, and then you go in and guess what? Retained earnings doesn't roll, and you've got negative accounts receivable, and you've got negative liabilities on the balance sheet, and it's real simple, right? And so the problem therein lies that people don't really understand what we do and what value we actually do bring to the table. Because oftentimes I'm talking with somebody that's got 15 or 20 years worth of experience, or they've got a master's degree, or they've had this experience of working with Fortune 500 companies, and that's what they're bringing to the table. But none of that really matters at the end of the day to the business owner client, because they haven't a clue what we actually do. And so the most important piece of that transition to value billing is to be able to bill for something where that value is obvious to the other person, where I don't have to get up and try to justify, what I really did. And a lot of times in this industry, we try to justify it with how hard it was. So we might emphasize, gosh, that was a struggle. That was really complicated. Or sometimes we do that with hours. Gosh, that just took me dozens and dozens of hours to do that. I laugh sometimes because when we get into our powwows and we're sharing amongst friends, there's people that'll say, well, it was a super easy return, but I didn't call them back for like 2 or 3 weeks because I can't let the client see how easy that was. But really, at the end of the day, should we even have to do that? Why do we have to pantomime the difficulty of something when there's obvious value there? And so therein lies the problem, is that the value of what we do isn't obvious. It isn't obvious because people don't really understand what we do. They don't know what they don't know. And so what I found to be a lot easier way to direct someone's attention to real value is to focus on value that is obvious, to focus on value that they can see, that I don't have to explain. If I'm giving somebody $30,000 of extra money in their bank account at the end of the year, the value of that's obvious. I don't have to come in and justify why it took me 5 hours to reconcile accounts receivable, but why it only took me a half an hour then at the end of the day to reconcile their bank account. It doesn't really matter. And I don't have to devolve into those types of circular conversations when I can just say, hey, I'm really proud of the work that we've been doing together over the last year together. I'm proud that we've been able to save you $30,000 in taxes that you were paying before you met us or before we started working together in this way. And it didn't cost you $30,000 to do that. At the end of the day, you paid just 10 for everything we've been able to do together. Now, I've been in business so long now that I've got client relationships where I can say, and gee whiz, over the last 15 years together, that's amounted to over $3 million that you've been able to have in your use than if we hadn't been working together after all this time.
And that's an impact.
Yes, that's an impact. And again, it's obvious, right? And so their win in working together is obvious. And that way I can leave the justification at the door. I can use the arguments leave that at the door. I can focus on what's really meaningful and important. And that's different for every person. Sometimes I've had clients say, gosh, I've lost my job after 30 years and I was an executive in a publicly traded company and now my stock options aren't valued at what I thought they would. And so now I'm kind of starting over and I think I'm going to get into real estate investing. Would you go to this seminar with me? And I've been able to say, sure. Is that in my job description? Is that in my engagement letter where I sit side by side with a client at a at a training program for real estate investing? No, but they found it really, really meaningful. They found it valuable. And so at the end of the day, that's really what matters is what they find important. And so for me, the key to value billing and making that transition has been, how do I make the value that's created from this relationship be so obvious that it stands on its own without explanation? And when you can do that, now I can use that type of value to spill over to all the other things that we do because it has to be done. I have to brush my teeth, but I can get paid very well to do it because the value that comes from the strategy is obvious. And that way I get paid for the whole package of work. And so that's been really, really instrumental in not only my own practice, but in working with thousands of professionals to do the same thing in their own practices.
We're focusing on a trust economy right now. It used to be that, we had the trust economy and we got away from that. It was a lot of indirect third parties. And I really believe that humans want that connection. They want to be able to trust, because let's face it, I don't understand your world. You don't understand my world. We are, and nor should we.
Right.
We need to work together because things are so much more complicated than they've ever been before. But together, we take our individual strengths and we bring them together. That's the trust that people want. And let's face it, people do business with people they trust.
Absolutely. And when you bring that piece of what you just said that's so important, Julie, into this conversation about software and AI, software doesn't make you a strategist. It just makes you faster at whatever you already are. Software doesn't build trust. We build that trust, but the software then can allow us to have the time to focus on that and to build that relationship piece. Again, I'm not sending somebody a bill for an hour's worth of my time because I attended their father's funeral with them, but they wanted the support. That's the trust piece. That's the relationship piece. And I think if I presented a bill for that, they wouldn't be too happy about paying that. But the great news is that I can still get paid to do that because I'm getting paid premium billing for all of the other work that we do together. And I'm freed up so that I can be there and be present for somebody. And that's something AI just can't do.
Absolutely. That human discernment, that's still that human connection. Well, Dominique, it's always a pleasure. I really appreciate your time. We appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to seeing you in July in Charleston. And is there, do you have any last comments that you want to share with our audience? I really appreciate your time today, and this has been outstanding. I will also mention you're obviously an author and have written many, many different books. The one that's really grabbing my attention right now is Get Paid What You're Worth. It's exactly what we're talking about. Get paid what you're worth. But it's also understanding the value that you bring and having confidence in that. Remember, I don't understand your world, not your world specifically, but I don't understand someone else's world. They don't understand mine either. They rely on us for that guidance and that wisdom. Yes. So my next read is going to be Get Paid What You're Worth. Any thoughts or closing thoughts as we move along for the day?
Always. I think it's, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. Anytime I have a chance to come and talk to people about what I love to do every single day is just a privilege. So thank you for giving me a platform here. I think, looking at that relationship piece, I think extends to our global teams as well as to our clients. And the key here is not to upsell, but it is to reframe the relationship. I think a lot of tax pros are kind of stuck playing defense. Send me your stuff. I'll tell you what you owe. But what we really want to do is move that more into an expanded relationship. Let's talk about what's next for you. And that goes beyond taxes, right? And most of us don't ever get the luxury of going on to those bigger conversations. It takes figuring out these important pieces of our firm, the technology, the SOPs, the team that's going to be around us to help us do that, as well as the product. What is our product, so-called, that we're selling to these clients? From a work perspective, though, it's all about relationship. And so you can start by planting seeds. You can use the information that you have as a discovery tool so that you can fill in those gaps and highlight them in simple, plain English. It's about slowing down. It's about asking better questions and presenting outcome-focused value. It's not just about offering a new one-time service. It's being able to be there doing things that a lot of people can't and or don't in this client's life. So I appreciate the opportunity. It's been fun to talk today, Julie.
Always a pleasure, Dominique. We'll look forward to seeing you in July, and I hope that our listeners that are listening with us today have learned a little bit more, or maybe even taken some time to evaluate what kind of transformation do they need to make in their business. Bottom line is, resources are out there to help you and to support you. Absolutely. Dominique, thank you so much. You have yourself a great day, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thanks, you too.
Bye-bye.